Hi guys, I know it's been quite a while. It just hasn't been the time for filming in my life lately. It's been a time for exploring and hiking and enjoying all the outdoor activities that I can do here in my new hometown of Munich. And especially now in the summer and with the special cheap train ticket that we have in Germany at the moment. However, I got worried that I would lose my filming mojo completely eventually if I didn't start again soon. So here I am. And what better time to restart a channel than the time of the mid-year book freakout tag? I'm also doing this tag kind of in place of a what I've read so far in 2022 video, or best of 2022 and or worst of 2022 so far. So I'm going to answer a couple of questions a bit more extensively than I might have otherwise. So let's get straight to it. I'm going to combine the first two questions, which are best book of 2022 and best sequel of 2022 so far. And for me, those are in fact from the same series. They are The Game of Kings by Dorothy Dunnett and Queen's Play by Dorothy Dunnett, which are the first two books in her Lyman Chronicles, which are a series of 6 books, but the first book, at least, is a standalone. So I don't know if Dorothy Dunnett had originally even planned it as a series or if she was just inspired by the success of the first volume. But in any case, the first volume can be read as a standalone. This is set in 1547 in Scotland, in the Scottish Lowlands. So at a time when Mary, Queen of Scots, was still a child queen, and the English were repeatedly sending invasion armies into Scotland, trying to re-annex Scotland, and then the Scottish were always retaliating with raids across the border to the south. And in this atmosphere, this political climate, our protagonist, Sir Francis Crawford of Lymond, a laird from the Scottish Lowlands, has been accused of fraternizing and collaborating with the English and was exiled and ended up in forced labor as a rower on a galley, kind of like Ben Hur. But he was able to escape and has now returned to Scotland and intends to clear his name once and for all. And this is the story of how he accomplishes that. The book begins with the words, Lymond is back. And it is so good. It's a historical novel that takes itself seriously and gives a lot of thought to character voice and to how its characters would have thought and spoken and acted. But for all its seriousness, it is also laugh out loud funny. There were a couple of scenes which honestly made me laugh out loud. And there is so much tongue-in-cheek humor in there. It was quite a surprise for me, really. I hadn't expected the book to be so funny. In the second book in the series, Queen's Play, the setting changes and we travel to the French court. And this book is a lot more serious than the first one, at least towards the ending, but there's also so much humor in here, so many hilarious set pieces, and so many endearing characters, just as in the first book. I liked this one a little bit less than the first book, but it's definitely one of my highlights of the year too. The third question asks for a new release that I haven't read yet but want to, and I'm doing this tag only just in time to name Moon Witch Spider King by Marlon James. I'm going to start buddy reading this next Friday on July 1st with Lauren Makar. I'll link her channel below. And this is, of course, the second volume in Marlon James's Dark Star trilogy, sequel to Black Leopard Red Wolf. And it tells the events from Black Leopard Red Wolf from a different perspective, from the perspective of a kind of enemy and reluctant business partner of the protagonist and narrator of Black Leopard Red Wolf. So this is going to be extremely interesting. It's going to be so intriguing to see how Marlon James kind of turns reader expectations and everything that we've learned in Black Leopard Red Wolf on its head when he tells the story from a different perspective. Question number 4, most anticipated release for the second half of the year. And for that I have 2 or 3 really, because sometime, I think in September, we are going to get 2 new releases from the late Cormac McCarthy. I'm not quite sure, I haven't done my research, I must admit, about how complete those 2 novels were when McCarthy died, and therefore how much editing went into the posthumous publication. But I'm looking forward to them anyway. This was quite the surprising announcement a couple of months ago, and I already can't wait to read them. They are called, by the way, The Passenger and Stella Maris. And my second answer to this question, or my third if you like, would be the final volume in Maggie Stiefvater's Dreamer trilogy, Grey Warren, which, if I'm not completely mistaken, will come out this September or October. And of course, I really can't tell you anything about that one if you haven't read the Dreamer trilogy, and best case scenario also the Raven cycle. But I'm extremely impatient for it, and so much looking forward to it, because with the second volume in the series, Mr. Impossible, we ended in a spot where you wonder how on earth we are ever going to come back from this spot. So I really can't wait for, well, closure with the third volume in the series. Fifth question is biggest disappointment, and of those I have a lot. The first one is probably going to be unpopular. It's Young Mungo by Douglas Stewart. I honestly didn't know before going into this that this would be Shuggie Bain, The Teenage Years. And I didn't read Shuggie Bain for a reason, and in hindsight, I think I would have liked it better than Young Mungo. In a nutshell, this is about the trials of a young gay boy, a teenage boy, in a Glasgow housing estate with an alcoholic absentee mother. And everything about it was so stale and cliche and stereotypical. I think my main problem with this is that it is set in the early 90s, which begs the question, why do we really need another story like this? I don't think we do, and because of that, everything in this seemed to me like misery porn and violence porn, because it doesn't really bring any new revelations. It doesn't tell us anything new. So it's kind of, everything seems kind of gratuitous for this reason. And yeah, like I said, pornographic. And this left a really bad taste in my mouth. I think I skim read the last 150 pages, because it was just giving off very cheap vibes. I'm sorry, I really wouldn't recommend this. In fact, I would recommend not picking this up, but I don't know, maybe if what this book talks about is complete news to you, then you might get something from it. If not, I really wouldn't pick it up. And another huge disappointment for me was The Forgotten Beasts of Eld by Patricia A. McKillop. This, I think, was her first novel, and I have enjoyed in particular her two latest ones, possibly her two last ones, The Bell at Sealy Head and The Bards of Bone Plain. And this one had some of what I enjoyed in her later books in seed form, but not yet fully developed. And it had some of the things or the things that I kind of disliked in her later books, but amplified by a factor of 1 million. And it really made me angry. Its moralistic message, its moralistic sexist message in particular. And I do wonder if the current contemporary version of Patricia A. McKillop feels a little bit uncomfortable about her early work and its message. It wouldn't surprise me, to be honest. I'd be curious to know what she thinks about this novel now. And another very sad disappointment came from an author that I have previously enjoyed too. It's The Birthday Boys by Beryl Bainbridge. And this is a novel about the disastrous Scott expedition to the South Pole. So this whole journey, this whole expedition was one huge clusterfuck in general, but in particular, Scott's last bid for the South Pole in a desperate attempt to overtake Amundsen, who in the end I think beat him by several weeks, but at least several days. This last bid was particularly disastrous because all 5 members of it perished in the Antarctic wilderness. And the book is written as a succession of first person accounts by these 5 people in the last race. And the 5 accounts are successive chronologically, so they chronicle the whole journey from before the journey proper even started to up until the last days. And therein lies the problem, because it makes no sense for us to have these 5 first-person accounts which aren't styled as journals and wouldn't make sense as journals anyway, because for at least 3 people in the group it wouldn't make sense to have written journals. They probably couldn't even, at least one of them probably even couldn't write. And there was nothing in them that styles them as journal entries or as letters or anything like that. So there is no reason why we would have first person accounts by people who died before they could tell their story to anybody else if they didn't do so in letters or diaries. So this novel lacks it isn't even really a novel. It completely lacks a frame narrative. And it is a particular shame because this book is a masterclass in characterization. It really is just a joy to read how, or to experience how our images of the characters change when the viewpoint changes and we see the characters from another point of view, and we see how people which are characterized by one point of view are characterized by another point of view, people on the same journey, I mean. And it is so expertly done how people characterize themselves through their worldviews when we see their shipmates describe the same events and people from their points of view and from informed by their own outlooks. So we have self characterization and characterization of others in a kind of continuous dance with one another. And this was really a joy to read. So it was especially painful that the book that just doesn't make sense from a narratological point of view, and I had to abandon it in the middle. I would so have loved to enjoy this book, but I just couldn't, and this was so disappointing. Question 6 is biggest surprise, and I guess that would be All the Pretty Horses by Cormac McCarthy, for how not completely bleak and hopeless it is. That's not to say that it isn't bleak at all. It's about a teenage boy from Texas who has no perspective for life in Texas and therefore goes with a friend to seek his fortune in Mexico. And by fortune, I mean that he looks for a fulfilling life, which for him just means working on a ranch with horses, with maybe the perspective of managing or even owning the ranch at one point in the future. And he is, of course, being a teenager and from a comparatively comfortable life in Texas, he, of course, falls flat on his face when he gets a reality check in Mexico. So, this is a coming of age story and about the loss of innocence as far as worldview is concerned. So, the end of childlike illusions, and it is so romantic in the original sense. It is, I mean all of Cormac McCarthy's books are quite romantic in the original sense, in the sense that a character's thoughts and feelings and their situation are reflected in nature and in their surroundings. But in this book, I thought that that was especially pronounced. Maybe it is just particularly in your face and unapologetic. I'm not gonna lie, it was kind of almost cheesy. It was just this side of cheesy, and I really enjoyed it unapologetically. Question 7, favorite new author, debut or new to you, and I guess for me that would be Dorothy Dunnett. But I also enjoyed Francis Spufford. I'm going to talk about this book in a minute. But unfortunately, he only has 2 novels out at this point, and his second novel, Light Perpetual, which I think was longlisted for some prize or other, maybe even the Booker. I don't really remember, but that one is written in present tense, which is just a no-go for me. So that I've only read one book by him, but I'm hoping for more in the future that isn't present tense. Newest fictional crush is question 8, and I guess I'm basic, so Diamond. Question 9 is newest favorite character, and well, Natasha Pulley has had a new book out this month, and her characters are the best, and they always capture my heart in the very first chapter and don't let it go again. And it was the same in this book. The half life of Valerie Kay, and Valerie is one of my new favorite characters. The book is set in 1963, if I'm not mistaken, in the context of the Kishtim nuclear experiments and the Kishtim nuclear disaster in the USSR. So it's based on a true story, and so it's based on true events, and unlike her other books, there is no fantasy in here, although some of the stuff in here seems quite fantastical. Um, I didn't wholly love this book because I think, well, let's just say that the Russian characters in here seem awfully English, or at least awfully familiar, especially at the times when Natasha Pulley tries to emphasize the difference between them and Western characters, Western people. And that made it a bit ridiculous at times and a bit, well, just not as accomplished as other historical novels that I've read these past 6 months or in my life, really. But I still very much enjoyed the protagonist of this book, just as I've enjoyed the protagonists of all her other books. Number 10, a book that made you cry. Several romance novellas by Risa Cooper have made me cry. The first book of hers that I've read is still my favorite of hers. That would be Hottie Scotty and Mr. Porter. I've reviewed it in a previous video. But almost all of her others I've enjoyed as well. And several of her characters have made me cry when they've been hopeless and lonely and have been feeling left out and just generally overwhelmed with life. I think I need to make a recommendation video of her romance novellas. Question 11, a book that made you happy. Golden Hill by Frances Bufford. This is again a historical novel. It's set in 1746 in New York, which was then just a small town trying to find its feet. And a mysterious Englishman arrives there by ship with £1,000 to his name, maybe, and a big mysterious plan. And this is the story of how he is trying to find his feet in New York, which turns out to be quite different from what he expects and quite a bit more difficult to navigate than he expects. And it is just so endearing how he blunders about with the best of intentions and unintentionally causes quite a ruckus and causes some lives to fall into ruin. In a way, this is a bit similar to All the Pretty Horses, in the way that a naive young man comes to a strange place and kind of gets his illusions crushed. But as far as character voice and authorial voice are concerned, this is, of course, quite different from Cormac McCarthy, as you can imagine. This book is written in a deliberately archaic voice, which nevertheless doesn't simply copy Regency or Victorian voices. It is its own idiosyncratic voice, and I like that a lot about this book. It's really refreshing voice wise. Question 11, most beautiful book that I've bought or received this year. And well, clearly the award goes to The Unicorn Hunt by Dorothy Dunnett, a book in the Lymond Chronicles. And this is obviously Sir Francis Crawford of Lymond from Scotland. I don't know what is going on here, but do I really need to know? I mean, this beauty speaks for itself, doesn't it? But honestly, I haven't bought that many books, and of the ones that I have bought, none are breathtakingly beautiful. But I kind of like this one, this vintage classic of Scaramouche by Gabriele Sabatini. It's kind of minimalistic and baroque at the same time. I kind of like that. And then I guess there is also this catalog of an exhibition of artworks made by the Spanish architect Santiago Calatrava, which is the exhibition is currently going on at the Glyptothek Museum in Munich. And I got gifted this book, but I also literally worked for it. And there is a direct connection between the museum and Calatrava because Calatrava was inspired to several sculptures and drawings and watercolor paintings by the statues in the museum. That's why the exhibition is held there. And controversially, the 13th and final question is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? And we all know that I'm not a person who makes TBRs, but I do have one more buddy read coming up, at least I think so, and that would be of The Snow Leopard by Peter Matheson. This is a classic of nature writing about the Himalayas. The events described in this, in any case, took place in 1973, and I'm a little bit apprehensive because these classics of nature writing can be, at best, awfully romanticizing, possibly cheesy, at worst, falling into the image of the noble savage trap. So I'm really interested in which way this is going to go. I was so apprehensive about it that I never even bought a copy. I found this one by a lucky accident in a little free library. So I hope you enjoyed this little overview of how things are going reading wise at the moment and how things have been going for the last few months. And I promise I'm going to try and film more regularly again in the next weeks and months. I'm probably going to make a number of short videos that don't take up so much time and don't take away time, too much time from going outside and exploring and enjoying the sunshine while I can. I hope you're doing the same thing if you are so inclined, and I'll see you hopefully very soon again with another video. Bye, guys!